Hello, welcome to Share in the Chair. This is Sunshine Cathedral's weekly interview program where I, Durrell Watkins, the senior minister, interview a different religious leader every week. And in the summer, July and August, we are focusing particularly on New Thought leaders because in the summers when the New Thought organizations tend to have their conferences and their retreats and so forth. And so we are and there's actually a divine science conference coming up in just a few weeks. And so 3 of the last 5 guests, including tonight, have been ministers in the Divine Science Federation. Tonight with us is the president of the Divine Science Federation, and also concurrently, for a little while anyway, the president of the International New Thought Alliance. And that, of course, is the Reverend Dr. Tim Stewart. So welcome, Tim. And we have some, he lives in Nashville. So he's an hour behind me here in Fort Lauderdale. And then you are from everywhere. So we're gonna listen, learn from Dr. Tim about some divine science and about his own personal journey, which has not really just been a short and straight shot. He's taken the scenic route to enlightenment, as many of us have. So my first question is for you, Tim. Did you have your spiritual journey is taking you through Pentecostalism and evangelicalism, and you wound up in New Thought. I think you even went to a Pentecostal Bible college, and then of course a lot of New Thought schools also. How did you find New Thought? I mean, it probably wasn't being served to you on a plate, in the beginning in rural Georgia or northern Florida or wherever. So how did you find it, and what made it feel like home for you?
Well, first let me just say thanks for inviting me to be on here this evening, okay? Sunshine Cathedral is a church I share with other people as an example of how to build bridges to New Thought. Now to address the question of how my bridge to New Thought came along. I was in fact a Pentecostal minister, preacher, and had been for years. I went to what was then Lee College. It's now Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee. And basically I had reached a point in that experience that I no longer believed certain things. I couldn't, similar to Carlton Pearson, if people are familiar with Bishop Pearson, who couldn't believe in a God of love that would condemn multitudes to hell. I looked at God as at that point in my life, still something outside, way off out there. And I could not conceive of God as knowing the end from the beginning and choosing to create humanity, knowing the end from the beginning. And that verse would come to me: straight's the gate, narrow's the way, few finding that one, all right, leads to everlasting life, but narrow is the way, or broad is the gate, wide's the way that leads to destruction, and many there. So God was going to create humanity, and the majority of them were going to hell because God wanted someone to worship him so terribly. That didn't make sense to me. And I left that. And then coming into New Thought, I basically dated my way into New Thought. Okay. I was single. I'd been married. I had gotten a divorce as I left the other movement as well. And when you do that as a minister, basically your friends are all ministers in that, and you become the heretic. So I became the happy heretic, and I had gotten into another line of work, and I had a booth at the Nashville Holistic Health and Wellness conference that year, and Dr. Wayne Dyer was the keynote speaker. And saw someone that I had seen out in public, spoke to her, and a lady walked up. I got introduced to her. That lady is now my wife. And after my wife and I started dating, she wanted to know if I wanted to go to church with her one Sunday morning. And I didn't care where we were going. As long as I was getting to spend time with her, I was happy. It's that way. So she had been a few times to a religious science church, and that was my first exposure to it.
Mm.
Now to that part of what made it feel like home, it was definitely a feel-good message, right? But until I took a class that was actually a Thomas Troward class, many people may not be familiar with Thomas Troward, but he was a British attorney, okay, and a judge in the Punjab area of India. So he could do these long run-on sentences that would be, 2 pages without a period in his books. And I was taking this class, and the reality, the truth of the oneness of God being all there is suddenly became alive to me. And I understood it was no longer just saying we're one, like people speak without any real meaning to it. And when that came to life, it sparked a memory in me of all the way back when I was a child and laying in bed and pondering some things that were very deep for a child my age, like what made me who I am? Why was I not born someone else? Or even, why was I even born part of the human species, And I had remembered as a child pondering that, and somehow I understood the presence of God was within me. And so when it felt very true. It felt like I was coming home when I really found that. So that's a little bit of my journey. I will also say that I wasn't just in Pentecostalism. There are many different little facets of it. And I followed a lot of people that are called Word of Faith people. Now, today there's a lot of scandal around that, not so much back in those days, but the Word of Faith movement, the father of that movement was a man by the name of E.W. Kenyon. Many people have never heard of Kenyon. They only think of like Kenneth Hagin, but go back a step further, E.W. Kenyon. And Kenyon had studied Mary Baker Eddy and Phineas Parkhurst Quimby. So in that movement, we didn't do begging prayers, just as in New Thought, we don't do begging or beseeching type prayers. But, even in those days, we spoke our word. Mm-hmm. Still believed in that duality, though. Still had the duality of having a devil to fight, and this type thing. But it was a little different mindset than what people think of in just Protestant Christianity. So that was that made it not quite as far of a leap for me into New Thought.
Mm-hmm. So. Joel Osteen's father was Baptist, but got into the Word of Faith movement. And one of his sort of personal mentors and teachers was a Unity minister there in Houston, the minister of Unity Church. So there's a lot of crossover that people aren't even aware of. The influence just from knowing people and sharing their ideas or whatever. But I've known some people in New Thought that it came by way of Word of Faith, because it was the Word of Faith people had the affirmations, but they explained it differently. They explained it as words have innate power, and so you're learning how to release the power in the way that benefits you or whatever. You're using the word, and then the way you know for sure you're doing it right is you're quoting scriptures. If the word you're saying is a biblical word, then for sure it's good, and you're using the word. But yeah, there's good and bad, and there's God, but God is outside, and God has an enemy. And so yeah, it was your word, that your words activate your faith, and faith is a force. And so it's almost like like medicine that you're taking or a car that you're driving. It was a tool that you used rather than an understanding of being one united part of the one thing, the one life, the one power, the one love, the one presence, the one wisdom. And so the theology was different. A lot of the mechanics seemed similar, but the theology was different because it wasn't a theology of omnipresence. No judgment. That's just how it was different then.
Oh, absolutely. I'm in total agreement. The theology was different. Where we would use those certain things, where we would use the word consciousness and they would use the word faith. Again, you get into some different mechanics of it. And the other thing, it was still, even with all that, it was the judgment, it was the condemning, it was the, standards. I remember that there were people who were so strict, they said, they had to quote that Bible verse
Mhm.
that such as all liars were going to have their part in the lake of fire and brimstone. So therefore, if you had Santa Claus at your home, you were a liar.
Right.
And you go to, everything, you were going to hell for everything. And they set a standard so high that people were constantly living in that feeling of condemnation. So it was definitely, a lot of fear rather than being based in love and being based in the truth of who we are and understanding it.
Well, so you had a few experiences, few different campsites in evangelical and Pentecostal and charismatic and word of faith experiences, and then you sort of married into New Thought.
Dated into it, yeah. That's
and then became a leader. But yeah, you said that that first service was a religious science church. My first service was a Unity Church. It was next door to where I was working, and I had to work on Sundays. And so it was a way that I go to church and then just dash right to work. I didn't know Unity from Mormon, from Jehovah's Witness, from Muslim, from Wicca. It was next door. That's what was important. And then, of course, it was amazing. But yeah, I mean, it really could have been, a UPC church next door. I would have been like, let me see. But if it had been UPC, I probably wouldn't have gone back. Unity, I went back. So anyway, but you were there, but then you got ordained in the International Metaphysical Ministries. You were involved in INTA. You were on staff at a religious science church. You're the president of Divine Science. For all I know, you've got something going on with the Infinite Way and with the Saint Germain folks. And I mean, I don't know. You just seem to be open to truth wherever it may show up from. And so, so you're very ecumenical, and I think there's more and more of us like that in the New Thought movement. What do you say to people? Because there's also other people who are like purist and staying. You got to protect our version of whatever, and we all do have slightly different vocabularies and slightly different founding narratives, and yet we all kind of pray the same, and we all seem to read each other's books. I don't see a big difference, but some people think it's very important to protect your narrative or whatever, and yet you seem to just find and share truth here, there, and everywhere. So what do you say to people who aren't comfortable with your deep ecumenism?
Well, first, I believe that it's something that was part of the founding of New Thought, because if you look back, there was a time when Ernest Holmes said that he wouldn't copyright his books. He later, due to some situations, did, but he wouldn't, because he said you can't copyright truth because truth belongs to everyone. The International New Thought Alliance, which brings all these different groups together, all right. If you look at the forerunner of that, it was the International Divine Science Association. It didn't, there's not a straight line between those two, but there was that movement, which was started by Melinda Kramer. You find that Charles Fillmore was in business with a man by the name of James Small. James Small was married to Nona Brooks, who was a great leader in divine science, was married to her sister, Alethea. So all of these things tie together.
You can almost imagine the pioneers like playing canasta together,
Well, I do. And unfortunately, and I hope I don't offend someone, but I'm just going to, unfortunately, in the different organizations over the years, people have been taught certain things that they have repeated that tend to not share the ties they had. And, when I was in religious science, and by the way, I went all the way through the practitioner training of religious science. Okay. So 4 years of classes with them. But I was always taught Ernest Holmes was ordained divine science because he wanted to marry someone. And I tend to think that there was more to it than that, because he was ordained by a lady by the name of Agnes Gaylor. And Ernest and his wife Hazel actually prepared a room in their home and invited Hazel to come and live in their home so he could be Ernest's teacher and mentor in divine science. To me, that's a lot more than getting ready to do a wedding. So he did do that. And again, one of the things that I will point out to those who want to protect their own, I'm a firm believer in knowing what you're talking about. I once had a conversation with a lady who happened to be a divine science minister. And we had gone to a particular conference and both ended up on the same shuttle from the airport to where we were going. And I said something about the similarities between divine science and religious science. And she immediately said, "Oh no," and spent the next 10 minutes, almost to our destination, telling me how they were so different. At the end of that conversation, I looked at her and simply said this. I said, "How many religious science classes have you taken?" And she said, "I've never taken any religious science classes." And that was the key. People who have studied and know these teachings, whether they're unity or divine science or religious science or UFBL, if you study more than one, you talk about their similarities in the way they are alike. And when you don't have that, then you speak from a place of, well, where there's not knowledge, and you focus on those things that are different. Right. And you may remember I did a talk at an INTA Congress in Fort Lauderdale. And I used a quote from Ernest Holmes there. I took the book up and had it highlighted, so it was his book. And Ernest even once said, whether you call it science of mind, and then he said religious science, so he termed it both ways there. He said religious science, science of mind, divine science, unity, and then he goes on, and I believe it was home of truth was the other one he mentioned, but one that is not really around so much these days. He mentioned all of those. He says, whichever way you want to call it. He said, they all speak the same thing. They say they don't, but they do. Mm-hmm. And that was Ernest talking. Yeah. You know? So I do believe that there's truth there, and we work best by when we collaborate on something. I can go back and I remember working in collaboration with a ministerial association when I was pastoring a church in Louisiana as a fundamentalist, as a Pentecostal. And we were able to bring in people who had a much greater influence on getting people in to hear the message when we worked together that none of us could have done independently. So I believe there are times that we as organizations can do that. And I will follow that with one thing, though. And that is, I still believe that there is a place and a purpose for each of the different organizations and teachings. Mm-hmm. Many years ago, a New Thought minister, put a poll on Facebook wanting people to vote for the best New Thought church in the town where her church was, in that city. And there were 4 there. And I looked at it, and something just didn't quite, that wasn't to me a real spiritual thing. But you couldn't comment unless you voted. And I didn't want to vote. And then I realized that you could vote for more than one. So I voted for all 4 of them. And then I could comment. And my comment was this, that regardless of which one you went to, they would all teach that we are expressions of God. As I like to say, I even like to get a little bit more specific. And I say, you're not just an expression of God, you are God in expression. You are God expressing uniquely right now is Durrell Watkins, okay? That divinity is there. But I said, all of them would agree on this thing of oneness. I said, but we are all individualized expressions of the one, and as individuals, we learn and we receive in different ways. So the place that you can best receive truth, the best place where you can best receive something that gives you strength and brings you peace and empowerment, that is the place that is best for you. Mm-hmm. And so each one of these organizations, I think there are people who need a little bit more of a Jesus-centered approach, and they may do better in unity or divine science. And there are others who need a little bit more distance from that, and they may do better in religious science. Find the place that resonates with you and understand truth is truth, regardless of where it comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. All of the pioneers were influenced by something. I mean, Nono was a faithful Presbyterian, and Melinda had been a lifelong Quaker.
Mhm.
And, so these pumps had been primed already by different religious experiences. And then what brought them to their new views were all unique. The Fillmores, had a dramatic healing, and but the Brooks sisters and Melinda also had dramatic healings, but theirs were accompanied by sort of mystical experiences. And then Ernest he sort of researched his way into it. His was sort of intellectual. He didn't have an aha moment. He just read this, and then he read that, and then he would apply it, and it worked. And then he read something else, and he would apply it, and it worked. And he sort of systematized. And they all come to these, very similar experiences and conclusions, but each in their own way. We probably also have to come to what's right for us, each in our own way. That's what they did. But then they also work together. Like listening to other people helped them be more of what they were. Annie Ricks Millets cooperated a lot with Unity, taught at Unity, did some editing for Unity. So she's got her home of truth, but she's also helping the Unitics. I just think that's the way it ought to be. I just think that's the way it's supposed to be. Paramahansa Yogananda used to say, if you can't find a self-realization fellowship, go to a Unity church. I mean, he would promote like we're similar enough, he would say.
Exactly. And, that in what is the 9th chapter, I think, of Luke, I believe I'm right. But the disciples go out and they come back to Jesus and they say, we saw this other person casting out devils, casting out demons. And we told him to stop because he's not one of us.
Right.
Jesus basically said, let him alone.
Yeah.
He's speaking truth. He's healing humanity. He's healing people. And so, and again, if we're really at this point of realizing oneness, because I believe when we get too much in this organization, this one, and organization, that one, and I'm grateful for all of them, we can't get into that thing of other, or this one is better, or that one is better. If we're all, oh gosh, I could talk about the oneness thing so much, because our people talk about a big ego. I'll put it this way. And I say, really, if our ego is our sense of self, many times it's because people have a small ego. It's like if they were water, they would look at ice and see ice as something different.
Right.
Well, they're both H2O.
Yeah.
But when you put them together and the ice begins to melt, there becomes that realization that they're one. And I think as we do that, we understand that if something benefits one, it benefits all. Yeah. And we can take that we can take that into organizations. We can take that into life. Regardless of what it is, if something benefits you, it is good for humanity. So,
yeah. A Course in Miracles says we're not healed alone. So if it raises you up, it's raising someone else up also.
Right.
And that's good. Well, so let's now talk about divine science specifically. We love everyone else, and we learn from everyone else, and we share with everyone else. But we also have our story and our journey and our uniqueness. So you've been president of DSFI for a few years, and a lot of people have heard of Unity, and a lot of people have heard of religious science, or if they're newer or younger or newer to realizing that maybe they only know it as Centers for Spiritual Living now, or maybe Anton, but the science of mind philosophy. So that's pretty well known, and Unity also. But people still, whenever they find out about divine science, that seems new to them in my experience. And a lot of times, I'll get a call or something, and someone will say, "Oh, I just read this exciting article about you guys. One of your people were on the cover of Science of Mind magazine." Like, no, that wasn't us. Great article, great magazine, but that wasn't us, or whatever. So we still are a bit of an unknown. What about the history or philosophy of divine science would you like for people to know? What is something that is sort of uniquely divine science or especially divine science that whether you can remember our name or not, it would still be good for people to know about?
Well, if you look at and I have to mention, with divine science being started by a woman, number one, UFBL would also be that. Many people hold UFBL in a different category because of Johnny Coleman, Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman's association with Unity First, and basically having the Fillmorian type theology that they take. But
which was also co-founded by a woman.
Also co-founded by a woman.
Yeah.
But being founded by a woman, one. Also, some of the things that people may not realize, we are, even though new, and use that phrase being new to some people, we're the oldest of the New Thought organizations or quote denominations. We started in 1888. Unity was 1889. And not only that, we're the only New Thought organization that I'm aware of that we can say at one time, the largest congregation, when I say largest church, I'm not people attending, in the United States was a divine science church. Now, a friend of ours told me that we were actually the largest in the world, and I think probably some of the Catholic cathedrals of Europe were larger than his. But during the years of the Great Depression, when people were really wanting a message that gave them hope and something positive, people were flocking to hear Emmett Fox, and we were the largest. So we are a smaller organization now. Many of our people, one of the things we've got are a lot of people who aren't quite as much on the technology. You are, as I guess, don't know if all your listeners know this, but you happen to be the vice president of divine science at this point in time. And I term limit out. I've been there for 6 years, so I will be August the 13th and 14th. We have our next conference, and I'll be stepping down. I term limit out, but we have so much to offer. All the different New Thought organizations focus on different things. In other words, they have different emphasis. Let me put it that way. Okay. If you, one person once said to me that divine science are the meditators and religious science are the demonstrators and unity are the lovers. Okay. They're more about the love in the community. But I do believe that in divine science, you're going to find a greater emphasis on omnipresence.
Yes.
If you look at, and again, I sometimes put it as things show how similar it is to religious science. You have in religious science what they call a 5-step or a 7-step prayer treatment. Both are there. Okay, but the first 2 steps of that, the first one is, it's their way of prayer. The first one is the recognition of God as all there is, that there is one life, one mind, one, whatever you want to, what word you want to use, there's one. And the second step of that is the unification of realizing that you as the person in this mode of prayer are one with that. If you take the divine science statement of being, it starts off saying God is all, perfect, the perfect love, the perfect life, the perfect substance, everything, all right? And man, or as I like to say, humanity, or we can make it personal and say, I am one with this, okay? So, and again, if you stand in that, you're in that constant mode of prayer, because anything you can think of, if you have experienced sickness, if you understand that God is perfect health and you're one with God, you don't have to get specific about the other. If
Right.
you are in a place that finances aren't exactly what you'd like from them to be, you understand that God is abundance. Look at the leaves on the trees and the sand on the beach, stars in the sky. God is abundance. And therefore, if you can identify and understand that you are that very same thing. So Divine Science, like, has a lot to offer. We do have our conference coming up, August 13th and 14th. It will be an online event, and various speakers. I'm not ready to announce everyone that's going to be speaking there, but I will tell them that a guy by the name of Durrell Watkins is going to be doing a workshop. We are just in awe. As I said earlier, I don't think you've ever understood how much I really adore Sunshine Cathedral. Okay, you have done something there, and as I said, you built that bridge. So you'll be talking on some things about church growth, and specifically a workshop, I think, more about how during this time when everyone's had to go virtual, your pathway to that. And as I said, so that is worth the price of admission in itself, your workshop. So we do invite everyone for that, and they could go to our website. There are some updates that are being done. We have someone that is working on that even now at divinesciencefederation.org, and find out a little bit more. And look for those updates in the next few days.
There's also Divine Science Federation International on Facebook. So you can look for the Facebook page, Divine Science Federation International on Facebook, and through the website, or you can also contact us from the Facebook. You can ask to be added to a daily study, a free email that comes every day. Sometimes it's a prayer or a lesson from a current Divine Science leader. Half or more of them are actually from the pioneers, the horses' mouths, and they're rich and wonderful. And so that's just a daily email. I get mine every day, and so that's something else people can get. There's a fee for the conference. It's a 2-day conference. It's morning and evening sessions.
Morning and evening sessions, and if you do that, you'll also be able to have the workshop experience that you'll be teaching. So there are morning and evening sessions. We do have the afternoon that you'll do. The other afternoon will be taken up with our annual business meeting. So
and login information they'll get when they register.
Log in when you register, and as I said, and again, you mentioned, and I didn't, so thank you for bringing that up. Things like our daily, we call it our daily studies email, and that Durrell, you play a part in that. So I will have to say, you may not know this, but I will share a very dear friend of mine that was part of the Religious Science Church over the years, and has been my friend well over a decade now. Had breast cancer, and she had a very, very difficult time. She is cancer free now, although she's just recently had her mother pass, and another difficult thing for her. But she commented how the daily studies were her source of strength. And during that time when she was so ill, it was the daily study that she looked for every day. So it is something that people do read and they appreciate. And I want you to know that, but also your readers, our listeners here, that it's available, it's free, and you do get one for every day. You get the weekends come in one email with a couple of days worth in it, but it will definitely enrich your life. Let you know a little bit more about who we are and what we're about.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so glad that we have this chance just to let people know about Divine Science. Even if you know a lot about New Thought, you might not have known as much about Divine Science, founded by Melinda Kramer, and then founded also a little bit later, simultaneously, by the Brooks sisters. And then they all found out they were teaching the same thing, and they asked Melinda if they could use the name she was calling it. And this has always been the Divine Science way. Melinda's like, of course.
That's true.
Yeah, why not? And
get back to the thing about, being, there wasn't no priority. It's like, you want to teach truth, teach truth.
Yeah. You're teaching the omnipresence of God, and people hearing it or their lives are being changed for the better. have at it. And a- and so that's, and then, Emmett Fox is part of that lineage. Joseph Murphy, part of that lineage. John Murray, part of that lineage. Ann Kuneth, part of that lineage. Just so many great luminaries. And then people from other traditions who've also crossed the path and shared. Robert Winterhalter was Divine Science, also Unity. Roy Eugene Davis, Kriya Yoga, also Divine Science. We've had Episcopalians and Unitarian Universalists that have come and stayed or come and gone. Uh, uh, um, Her name's went on my head. Bernadette, F. Bernadette.
Another thing what's come to me is Peters, but that's not right.
No, that's not. She's another great deacon. Anyway, Turner, F. Bernadette Turner. Thank you, Bernadette. She was a psychologist, and she wanted to be an Episcopal priest, but back in the year 1 or whatever, that was not an option for women. So she became a divine scientist, and she was a minister. And she writes really kind of funky, cosmic-y stuff. And then in her 80s, after she ministered, had churches, started churches throughout the Midwest and Virginia, she winds up in a retirement home, becomes their chaplain, and in her 80s becomes an Episcopal priest. So as a priest in a nursing home, she's teaching yoga and meditation, but she's also doing her Episcopal Mass thing in the chapel. And that's just always been divine science. That's what I love about divine science, is that we're hard to nail down, we're funky, we're open, I love that about us. It's why I thrive, I think, because I'm like trying to nail Jello to a wall. And so divine science fits me pretty perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet our principles are clear. Our principles are very, very clear.
Our principles are clear. And, the life-changing factor, just like you're naming all of these great luminaries, a lot of people may not realize it, but if you're like most New Thought churches or a lot of churches, you probably have people that are in a lot of 12-step programs. Emmett Fox played a huge role in the founding of AA. So the 12-step programs, all these things, there are so many ties. When I look at New Thought overall, I think of it like a tree. And you have the branch over here that is a unity, and over here is religious science, and here's UFBL, and here's, all the others. All right. But I look at divine science more as being like the trunk or the roots of that because everything tends to have a tie to that, where, to divine science, because it's the oldest, and it was that starting spot for so many. And as you said, we are very open. And I like to say, I'll throw this in. Being part of the LGBTQ or community, your church is LGBTQ centered. We're not just tolerant. Tolerant is when you put up with something, like you tolerate pain. We're accepting. All right. There's a difference between being tolerant and being accepting and being loving and understanding that, it's all about humanity and having it. Well, I will say something that is rarely ever said publicly. Okay. One of our great, for one of the great people in our movement, there's not, because of the time in which she lived, it's not just written in stone, but many of us suspect that she was probably a lesbian. All right. Because she never married. She had a lady friend who always traveled with her. And there were so many things that make us kind of suspect that.
There's three or four of the pioneers that I suspect. And I think today would be more forthright about it, because they could be, the culture is different.
Because they could be. Yeah. And as you know, we've always had, ever since I've been a part of divine science, we've had LGBT, I don't think we ever had anybody who is transgendered, but we've had people of the gay community who've always been a part of our board and a part of leadership. And we continue that. We have people of color. So we believe in that it's, the diversity and the inclusion. And again, not tolerance, but acceptance and love.
Fenwick Holmes was, of course, the brother of Ernest Holmes.
Right.
And he was originally a Congregationalist minister, but he became a divine science minister and was forever. Even while he was helping Ernest with religious science, he was a divine science minister. He ministered in a divine science church, very famous. It's actually already come up today. He followed some of those people, and he contributed to the founding of an entire new movement in Japan, Seicho no Ue. And so that was a divine scientist that was part of that. And Norman Vincent Peale, very famous, universally known, was influenced by Ernest Holmes and the Fillmores and Emmett Fox, a divine scientist. So yeah, it's all fascinating and interwoven. But we have one more question. The questions are always, the first three are always tailor-made for the person that they were talking to. Then there's a little promotional moment, and you've done that with the conference and the daily studies. And then finally, everyone has the same question. I love that there's one question and so far about 1,000 answers. So that's why it is what it is. And so you get the question: what happens when we die?
Okay, and you do save that one for last. And if we're honest, I don't think any of us can speak and say from a point of I know this or I know that. But here is what I believe and what I base it on. If I look at what I call the pattern, the way God operates, we are today, we, as divine scientists, we can say, like a lot of people in UFBL say, that we can take the Bible seriously, but not literally. So we would look at humanity today, and we would look at science and talk about, evolution. It doesn't do away with God, understand that. But evolution is always about something better. And to me, death is that next step in the evolution of us individually. So I believe that whatever comes after this event that we call death is passing to something that is a greater expression of life. I believe it's a greater expression of love. I believe it's a greater awakening and an awareness. I definitely believe that what we have is our consciousness survives that experience of death. I believe that. As I told someone once, I don't think there are streets of gold. I think that's totally symbolic about something that is such a higher and greater experience, that the things we treasured in this life would be things we would toss down to trample on, okay? Mm-hmm. Because it's such a higher experience of life. We have to remember that if God is infinite, okay, then there's infinite experience.
Yes.
And we can never begin to scratch the surface, because a 0.1% of infinity is still infinity. Right. You can't begin to touch it. So experience will forever unfold. I've talked mentioned Ernest Holmes. We've mentioned him several times today. But what we believed, he says he believed in the eternality of the human soul, forever expanding. Okay, so I do believe that we have that. It's a forever expanding experience. Exactly what that is, I don't know. I think that I definitely think it's not something to be feared. Okay, I don't think there are any demons or pitchforks. That was something not even taught until 400 years after the time that Jesus was on the face of this earth. So, so to me, it's the next step in an evolution that is forever leading us onward and upward. And exactly, I don't know, but I do believe it's a better life or a better experience than what we have now. Greater expression of life.
Okay. I like it. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. It's been fascinating, and it would be. That's why you got the call.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's always, I think, enlightening and informative for people just to hear the ideas. There's so many ideas, and I love sharing them with our folks. So thanks for doing that. Remember to go to divinesciencefederation.org to learn about the upcoming conference and how to register. And if there's any hiccups with that, remember they're still doing some updates on it. So try again in a day or two, or send an email. And if you're at Sunshine Cathedral, you already know the email. It's ty@sunshinecathedral.org. And so, and we'll get you the information you need. So thank you, Dr. Tim, and thank you everyone for watching. God bless you.
Thank you for having me.